Welcome to the PopCult Podcast with your hosts Tyler and Tommy.
Hello.
Today we are discussing The Last of Us. We're going to do a bit of a review of the first episode of Season 2. We're also going to look back and talk about how much we enjoyed and what we thought of Season 1, and also our relationship with the games. And we'll also do our usual pop cult recommendations of films, TVs, games, etc., the things that we've been playing recently.
All right, let's do it.
Maybe we should start with a look back at the games and our relationship with them and what we thought of them, of course. So, Tommy, I know you're a big fan, so do you want to start us off?
Big fan, yes, of course. The Last of Us is one of those seminal experiences in gaming, in my opinion. I mean, if you had a PS3 back in the day, you had to play The Last of Us. It was a new cinematic adventure game from Naughty Dog.
Is it as old as the PlayStation 3?
Yeah, 2013, I think it came out. Yeah. It was PS3, then, it really popped off with the PS4 and the re-release, the remaster that they did. They remastered that game 1,000 times.
I'm pretty sure they're still releasing remasters of that game.
Yeah. But Naughty Dog, is famous for the Uncharted franchise, which at the time, I don't think I had played. But what I did play from Naughty Dog were the Jak and Daxter games. Have you ever played those?
Oh, used to love those games. Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite video game series growing up, I think. So, Naughty Dog, great pedigree, pardon the pun.
Did they not? They Crash Bandicoot as well?
They did the first few Crash Bandicoot, yes. The new ones are made by a different studio. They don't have the rights anymore. Toys for Bob probably made the last one, the It's About Time.
Right. Another great series as well. I grew up on the Crash Bandicoot games. Absolutely love them.
Yeah, they reference Crash a few times in the Uncharted series too. I think in the fourth one you have a little throwback level from the first Crash Bandicoot as well. So yeah, I mean, Naughty Dog is one of those studios that even people who are not really super familiar with gaming and, video game studios, they know the name. It's a well-respected name. But yeah, The Last of Us is good. It's great even. It's one of those stories that really grab you. I remember the feeling of not being able to put the controller down. I was so engrossed in this story, in these characters. I care about them so much. I heard people say that it's a cliche story. I don't know if you agree. It's The Road meets The Walking Dead. And, sure, I don't care.
It's certainly not insanely original, but it's just really well executed, and it's not necessarily the plot or the premise, it's the characters which really excel.
I agree with that. I think, it's the characters that make the story. And at the time, especially, we didn't have many characters in gaming that were as strong and as real, if you will, as Joel and Ellie. And also, I think the ending of that game makes this story great. And it's so great, in fact, that one could argue that we didn't really need a part 2. But, getting ahead of myself, I guess.
Yeah, because I'm not as familiar with the games. I was always on Xbox back then, so I didn't actually have a PlayStation when it came out, but I obviously knew that it was really good and saw all the sort of applauds that it got.
Yeah, it was in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, so I went and sort of watched somebody do a gameplay sort of walkthrough of the whole thing, and so I've experienced the game in that sense, and yeah, I thought the story was fantastic, but does it end like the show ends?
Yeah, it's like beat for beat, shot for shot, the same thing.
So the final moment is is Joel lying to Ellie.
Yeah, she asked him to swear that what he told her about what happened in Salt Lake City with the Fireflies, that they didn't really find a cure, all those things that he lied about. She asked him to swear that all of that is true, and he swears, yes, it's true. And then they continue on and they go to live in Jackson, which is the setting of season 2 as well, one of the main hubs in the game and in the show. But like going back to the game for a second, because I wanted to say something that I think is really important, because the gameplay of The Last of Us, is serviceable. It's not one of those, it's classic action adventure story with, some horror sprinkled throughout. But the story, as we said, is what makes the game great. And also, something that I find really interesting in The Last of Us is the depth of the character's psychology and the way the more gamey aspects of the game actually serve the story. I'm thinking about Joel and his selfishness, right? Which is a character trait that we see very well expressed in the TV show as well through Pedro Pascal, which I thought did an amazing job as Joel. His roughness, his detachment, it's what allowed him to survive all this time in the post-apocalypse. And the way Ellie kind of breaks through that barrier, it's also what triggers something deep within Joel, a protective instinct that leads us to this very powerful ending, to him killing everyone to save her, to dooming humanity because he doesn't want to lose his surrogate daughter, his daughter again.
Yeah, and it's definitely, you can see he's warming up to her, but he's so closed off because we've always, at this point, he's already lost his daughter, he's lost Tess.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't necessarily want to let anybody else in case, of fear of losing them again.
And then there's always this funny thing, there's always this element of dissonance in games like this, like Uncharted, another Naughty Dog game. Don't know if you've ever played those, but Nathan Drake is supposed to be this kind of like lovable asshole character. But if you look at the reality of what's happening on screen, he has killed thousands of people across 4 games. So it's like a mass murderer.
Yeah.
And in The Last of Us, Joel's brutality is actually part of the story. It even justifies his behavior at the end. He's such a monster that is willing to kill all these people just to save one person that he cares about. Then that's one of those things that work a little less in the show.
Yes.
Because you only have a few key scenes where we see Joel's brutality, and he comes across a little bit softer, a little bit less of a murdering psychopath. It's enough, I guess, but like it's one of those things that is lost when you're not playing as him. There's something lost when you translate a story like this, even though it's very cinematic, very TV show-like.
Yeah.
There's always something lost when you change the medium in which you tell a story.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, like you said, those mechanics actually completely undermine the story sometimes. Like, you have your character, you're working your way to get to a cutscene, and this cutscene is talking about, you being the good guy, and you've brutally murdered 30, 50 people just to get there. And it's like that just goes unspoken a lot of the times, and obviously it can be a bit silly. And it seems like the second one has a lot of that. They don't work the mechanics of the game as well into the part 2, because again, I haven't played part 2, but I watched somebody play through the story.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many scenes where Ellie's killing dogs.
Oh yeah, so many dead dogs.
And it's like it's a bit of a hard watch. And then the whole thing is her dealing with, should she be a killer? Should she not?
Yeah.
I think she's already done it, because we've seen her kill 50 dogs already in the first hour of the game.
This is probably where I should say that we have a video essay coming out here on the channel. Should be out next week, maybe a little later. I'm working on it right now. In that essay, I go into some of my issue with part 2. That's pretty cool, I think, personally. So, check it out when it comes out. But yeah, I agree 100% that the amazing way they kind of use the dissonance in the first game is not used as well in the second one. There are so many moments where agency is taken away from you. You feel like you need to do stuff that you don't really want to do.
Yeah.
Which, the ending of the first game was so powerful because you felt like you were doing something wrong, but also like you had no choice. Of course, I'm going to save Ellie because you spent so much time with her. You love her. You love this character. You grew to know her, and you don't want to see her die. For what reason? To save this war that tried to kill you for 12 hours. So it was amazing, and they forgot. they kind of forgot in the second game. I like the second game, but like some of that stuff doesn't really work as well.
So you'd say you still, because obviously the second game nowhere near as revered as the first. I think people still hold it highly in terms of its graphics and its visuals and great cutscenes, but in terms of obviously the gameplay, it doesn't develop much from part 1 and part 2. And then also,
I mean, it didn't really have to, reinvent the wheel that much. It's still kind of like a cinematic horror movie.
No, but I think any time you do a sequel to a game, or you're bringing out the next part of a series, I think if you're not improving gameplay mechanics at all, then you're a bit stagnant. And all this is a cutscene game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they've introduced some stuff, but they didn't really use it that well. Like, I think of that rope mechanic that they have in the game. Like, sometimes in the game, you have to, like, take this rope. You need to throw it. You need to solve puzzles using ropes. And it's like 2 or 3 puzzles in the whole game. And that rope mechanic, it's so incredible. Like, you throw this rope, and it just really...
Oh, yeah.
It looks like a real rope.
The physics of it are fantastic.
The physics are insane, and you barely see it. You barely use it. So like I don't know. I guess they had other priorities, but
yeah. So you'd say you still really enjoyed part 2 of the game?
I mean, I think my main issue with part 2, and we will probably get into this when we review the first episode of the second season, is pacing. I hate the way the story is told. Not the story itself, even though there's some stuff in the story that I don't really love, I guess. But like I think what hurts The Last of Us Part 2 the most is pacing, is the way the story is told. The way we keep stopping and going, flashbacks, and then you go back and you change perspective. You are a different character for a while, then you go back to the other character, and then there's a flashback again. That is just frustrating. You keep losing track of what you need to care about because so many times in the game they decide to make you do something else that you don't care about. Maybe you would care if the story was presented in a different way. I mean, we don't want to go into spoilers, of course, but like maybe there's like a very intense sequence that like you're really invested in, and then the game is like, okay, now time for a flashback about this character going through the woods with this other character we've never met. And maybe that sequence would have been great if it wasn't positioned there,
Yeah.
like if it wasn't there in the story.
And I think that's done purposefully to be, to be almost a bit edgy, or it's like, oh, well, this is going to be so unformulaic how we tell this story. But yeah, you have obviously, maybe we don't want to say about that moment of what happens.
No.
You have your new character coming in and sort of taking over from the main beloved character in the series, does something heinous, and then now forces you to play and enjoy that new character. And it's like, why would you, it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough sell to try and get you to like this person. And just is that just a bad idea, actually? So, yeah, obviously, part one of the game's fantastic, one of seminal games that's been made in the last few decades. And part two, obviously not not as good, caused a lot of controversy. But yeah, I mean, and how do you think the show, season one in particular, did in portraying that story?
My overall thoughts are that I think the show does a great job at adapting the game. I am disappointed at some of the changes, naturally, having experienced the game first. That's just, I think you can't escape that. But I think overall they found the right balance between recreating the best moments from the game and add some other stuff that helps flesh out the world and tells a story where the main tension can't come from the feeling of, oh my God, I'm going to die now. But they have to rely on, plot progression and episode by episode unraveling these characters, putting them in situations that tell us more about them and about the story. I still prefer the game in some aspects, but I believe this one is one of the better game adaptations that we got.
What are those significant changes from the game that you didn't like in the series?
So there's some stuff that they decided to change, which I just find weird. Like the whole sequence that's placed in the middle of the game where you meet with Henry and Sam, the two brothers.
Yeah.
In the game, you go through various locations, you fight infected, you fight raiders, and then what happens in this show happens in the game too. It's a very harrowing scene, really well done. But in the show, they decide to place the story within this larger conflict between the Fedra, it's kind of like police force of the post-apocalypse, and the inhabitants of this city who took over the government, let's call it, of the city, and on this leader. And this leads me into one of the criticisms that I have of the show, which is the casting. Some of the casting is a bit meh.
I thought you might bring up. Have you ever seen 2.5 Men?
Some of it, yeah. Don't love it, but
it's like that Charlie Sheen sitcom back in the day.
Yeah.
The leader of that group,
Melanie Linsky.
Yes, she plays Charlie Sheen's like obsessed stalker neighbor.
Okay.
And so I couldn't, and I've never really seen her in much else other than that.
I guess she's scarier in that too.
Oh my God. I mean, terrible casting. That was at the point where, the show started to lose me a bit when they're sort of introducing her character and her story. It's just not threatening as a villain at all.
Yeah, so Melanie Linsky, for those who haven't seen the show in a while, she plays this leader of the human faction. She's on a revenge path. They want to do this kind of like sweet lady turned ruthless leader kind of thing, but she doesn't feel that imposing. She dies quite quickly. I think over the course of 2 episodes, she just dies. So yeah.
But gets a lot of screen time in those 2 episodes. She's really heavily focused on, and like you said, dies very quickly.
Yeah, they want to do this thing. There's a lot of parallels in the show, and some of them really work well. like I think the Bill character and the way it mirrors Joel and all that, the whole episode that they do with him and Frank, I thought was very touching, very well done. It's a little bit of a departure from everything else that we've seen in the show, but I think it works in creating this connection. Like the story is about this, it's about love, it's about caring about someone else, it's about putting your life in danger because you want to save that person. So the themes are well expressed in that episode about Bill. And then when we go back to Joel and Ellie, we have a newfound understanding of what the story wants to be about. But with this character, they want to really create a parallel. She wants to avenge her brother who Henry got killed. She wants to kill him and his little brother, but he wants to protect his little brother who's also deaf.
And her brother who died was the sort of leader, the de facto leader of this group.
She took over.
And now that's how she's taken the position, which at least makes sense because it's, there is an element of like before you learn that backstory, I'm thinking, why the hell is everybody taking orders from this lady? But
yeah, no, it's insane.
So she's an original character.
She's an original character. I understand the need to introduce like a new kind of conflict. The interesting thing is that the highest moments of tension in the show are the moments where in the game you're actually just putting down the controller and enjoying a little cutscene, because the high tension moments are when you're playing and you're dying because the fucking clickers and raiders are trying to kill you. So it's interesting to see how they have to change the structure of the story to make it more engaging and more interesting. And they come up with this storyline, but I don't think it works. And also it's resolved so quickly. And I think one of the biggest issues in general with the show is how quickly some of these stories are resolved. Like, for example, the actor who plays David, the leader of the cannibal group. Scott Shepard is his name. That actor fucking killed it. He's one of the best. He's probably better than David in the game. He's so good. He's so just creepy and imposing, and just like you can feel how horrible he is inside, even though he tries to play the good guy.
It's a really good scene when he's talking to Ellie in the prison cell, and he's like trying to sort of rationalize their turn to cannibalism. That was a really good scene.
Yeah, it's straight from the game. So well done. Perfect casting, even though it looks different. Like, I don't care that characters look different from the game, but like, he's just perfect. But I felt maybe they could have stretched that story over a couple of episodes, ratcheting up the tension a little bit more, making you really fear for Joel's life, for Ellie's life. I think it just gets resolved in one episode, and that episode is fucking amazing. But the game, the winter section of the game, lasts a few hours. You play as Ellie, you need to hunt, then you come across these characters, and then you need to escape the infected, and then you need to find a medicine for Joel, and then Joel needs to rush to save her, and then you have to kill this guy as Ellie. It's insane. It's so well done, and the tension builds up over hours of gameplay. And here you just get the kind of like cliff notes, the best moments, and there's no much action, which again, I understand. Another complaint that I have is the lack of infected in the show.
Yeah.
I felt it less the second time that I watched it. The first time I was like, okay, when is the next clicker scene coming? And it never did. This time I enjoyed the story more, I think, on a second watch, because I appreciated kind of like the pacing of it a little bit more instead of comparing it to the game all the time. But still, I feel like a couple of more scenes with the infected should have been added.
You're definitely right. That I think that was a complaint that a lot of people had. They are very, there's only a few big moments where we're in conflict with the clickers, and it's a shame because they're done so well in the series. Like, they look fantastic, and the way they're the actors they're getting to perform. I think there's one of the clickers in season 1 who's played by a fairly famous gymnast or something, and they were doing some insane movements with it, and they are, I think, easily some of the most captivating bits with the encounters with the clickers, and it definitely doesn't happen enough in season 1. Just what you were saying before as well about the pacing towards the end of the show, and it felt a bit rushed, some of those episodes. That's why I personally have a bit of an issue with episode 3. Not that I don't think it's a fantastic episode. It's a really great little what do you call this? It's a type of episode,
A vignette?
a vignette, or
Oh, like
a bit like the
not a bottle episode?
bottle episodes, kind of like the Fly in Breaking Bad. You know, we're not necessarily moving any plot or anything, but we're exploring themes here. I don't
Yeah.
think you can do that in the third episode of a series. It's way too early to be doing stuff like that.
I agree.
Going from, we really needed to establish Joel and Ellie's relationship more, and come episode 4, I didn't feel that, because we had spent a whole episode away from those characters. And if anything, in the first half of the season, the best developed characters are Frank and Bill, which it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, fair. I think it's the placement in the series that really, robs the episode itself of its strength. And if it was a longer season, with more episodic moments here and there, but it's a tight 9-episode show, so I get your criticism, and I feel like the Riley episode, the flashback episode with Ellie, is also,
Because that was part of the DLC as well, wasn't it? So that's
yeah, that
not
was
even
literally
part
a
of
DLC.
Yeah.
They just added in because, well, I mean, it's backstory for Ellie. It makes sense to include it, but it does stop. I still remember this meme that came out with that episode. I'll try to put it on the screen if I find it, but basically it's like this lady just laying there with a caption, Joel bleeding out on the floor while Ellie is having a flashback about Riley. It's like this woman just like thinking back.
Yeah, they're not. Then those two parts are not positioned well in the first series, and I also think, to me, when I first watched it, and I know a lot of other people had this reaction as well, it really was. It came across a bit virtue signaling. Like, it was like,
Yeah,
I want to do in my first series this big gay love story, and this is the one that's going to be up for all the Emmys and get all the applauds and etc. etc. And it's like, and it's don't take away from it. It was a fantastic episode. And what's his face? Who plays Bill? What's his name?
Nick Offerman.
Nick
Is so
Offerman
good.
is amazing. He's so damn good in that. And I think that's why I didn't necessarily hate it. It was still a good episode, but it just,
Yeah.
it annoyed me in what it was doing.
It feels like it was made for the wrong reasons. It was made to be like, oh, this is not just a video game adaptation. We are trying to make art here. So let's put a little love story here and, underrepresented groups and whatnot. It feels like The Last of Us had these themes. It's an interesting difference with the game. Bill in the game is completely different. It's just a guy that Joel and Ellie go to after the events of Tess dying. They don't know where to go. They go there to get a car from Bill. And there's a whole mission, I guess, where you have to go into this school to find a battery for this truck that you're going to use to move across the country. And Bill helps you, and this very curmudgeon character who finds Ellie and Joel just a disturbance in his daily life of killing infected and living by himself. But we do get the hint of his sexuality, and we learn about his relationship to this guy named Frank. But the relationship is completely different. At some point in the game, I believe you find Frank's body, like he hanged himself.
Okay.
So there were two characters who, like it was a different kind of story that they were telling in the game. And I enjoy the change, honestly. I think, as you said, Nick Offerman is great. The other guy, I forget the name, was also really good in the episode. They link it back to this relationship with Tess and Joel and, to the themes of the story. So it works. But I agree with you. The placement was weird. And I feel like they wanted to highlight right away these topics that they know they win awards, I guess.
Totally. And what other great television series completely goes away from your main characters and your plot and does a very thematic based episode in the first season? I don't think I can't think of one that does that. Yeah, and it put a lot of people off the show. It certainly didn't deter me, and I still enjoyed it. But yeah, just that should have come way later in the story.
Yeah, I did enjoy it more the second time because, again, you knew it was coming. So you were just, and maybe watching it, like binging it instead of watching it week by week.
You knew it was
I was
coming.
satisfied.
You knew it was coming, so you couldn't be severely disappointed about it.
Yeah, no, but like the first 2 episodes are really great and they're very action packed. So, it's a nice little change of pace when you watch the season as a whole and you're binging through it. But when you're waiting week by week and you get an episode where you barely see your main 2 characters and you spend time in the past in a story story that doesn't really have any bearings on what we're witnessing now, it does feel frustrating, and I understand the criticism. But that first episode, and then we should probably move to season 2, or we're going to stay here all day. But first episode is brilliant, and it's a brilliant example of how they adapted the game well, because in the game we start on the night of the outbreak, right? And we play as Sarah, Joel's daughter. And they escape the house, and, we get to all the way to that moment where she sprains her ankle and Joel has to carry her away. That's the first time we take control of Joel. And then, the most harrowing sequence in all of gaming, she dies and you have to cradle her as she bleeds out on the ground. And then we cut to 20 years later. But it's very smart in the show to instead follow her for the whole day, because just like in the game, the show kind of like lulls us into this sense of, okay, people are turning into zombies. We're going to follow these father and daughter as they escape the invasion. If you don't know anything about the story, you kind of like expect that to be the plot. And then you're hit with that brick of a twist that it still haunts me to this day. Still wake up screaming in the middle of the night. And I think the way they did it in the show was really, really well made. And they didn't do it all the time, which is annoying. But, props for that.
Yeah, I thought the first episode was really good, and especially when they are just ripping shot for shot from the game is when the show is at its best, to be honest. Like, the sequence in the car when they're going through the town. We have a few of those also later, like when Joel's up in the house with the sniper with Sam and Henry and Ellie.
Yeah.
Like, those are almost shot for shot from the game, and that's when the show is at its best, to be honest. What I was also going to say, what was some of your sort of favorite moments from the first season?
So I guess that's cheating. All the moments that were taken straight from the game with these new actors, there's a few lines that change, but they're mostly intact. The confrontation between Ellie and Joel when they have to leave from Jackson to kind of like do the last stretch of their journey, and he wants to kind of leave her with Tommy, but she doesn't want to be abandoned again, I guess, and they have this incredible scene. I mean, in the game, it's even cooler because she runs away with a horse, and you have to run after her, and then you reach this abandoned house on a hill, and she has hid in this room, who was a girl's room before the outbreak. And so she's like reading through her diary, and he comes through the door, and it's basically like a dad talking to her teenage daughter, and it's the first time that you kind of like see them as that, and it's so well made. And then they have the conversation that they also have in the show. In the show, it's a little bit simpler. She's still in Jackson, she's just in a room, and he walks in, but it's still very powerful, and the actors do a fantastic job. I think, Bella Ramsey got a lot of shit because she doesn't look like the character, and I don't really get that. I understand that maybe there were actors that looked more like Ellie from the game. We mentioned Kaylee Spaney recently,
Yeah.
She would have been perfect, but she nailed the performance in season 1. We'll see what happens with season 2. I have thoughts on that. We'll talk about it in a couple minutes, I guess. But she really nailed those scenes.
See, for me, it took me a while to warm to her in season 1, and it wasn't necessarily just a look. I don't know whether her performance in the earlier ones is that great, and also her relationship with Joel. It wasn't until the scene when they hold up in that big abandoned building and they put the glass all around them, and it's when Sam and Henry end up finding them, and she's been cracking the jokes from her book to him,
love those,
all throughout the last few episodes, but then she finally gets him to break when they're sleeping, and he like lets out a little laugh, and it's the first time we see Joel experience a bit of like positive emotion for a while anyway. And that was the moment where I felt like they had started to have a really good connection and display on screen together.
That's a very good moment. And also, I feel like I've already said this, I guess, but rewatching in the show and kind of like binging a few episodes a day, you really feel the progression in their relationship, which is something that I didn't really feel the first time when I watched it week by week. I felt like it didn't really work that well as it did this second time that I watched it. Like, I feel like you can really see Joel's resistances slowly fading away as he kind of like embraces this new role as a protector for Ellie. I thought that was really well done.
Is she as endearing and likable in season 1 Ellie and part 1 of the game Ellie? Is Bella Ramsey's portrayal of the character as likable? And
I think she's spot on. I mean, game Ellie, she's still very direct, very foul-mouthed, you could say. She says fuck a lot, but I do feel like and it's a necessity of the show. They hamp it up a little bit because they have less time to establish her. So like she's way more aggressive in the beginning, when this is a side of her that you don't really experience at first. You learn more about her at the start in the show compared to kind of like slowly learning about her by just being with her in the game. They had to make choices, and we'll see with season 2 they have to make a few choices that I don't know if they will work, honestly. But yeah, I think generally they did a very good job, and she did a very good job. I wasn't enamored with the performance at first either, but episode 2 I was sold. I was like, okay, she's Ellie, that's fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it took me a little bit longer to warm up, but I definitely, yeah, like I said, from that moment, so that was kind of in the mid-season, I did start to warm up to their relationship a lot more. So yeah, we'll go on to, we both watched the first episode of season 2. I watched it this morning. I think you watched it yesterday, didn't you?
yeah.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on it?
So it's hard for me to talk about this first episode without going into spoilers for the story, because so much of what I like and dislike about it is tied to how it differs from the game.
Yeah, we can do a little spoiler section sort of at the end of our episode 2 review.
All right, we'll put a big spoiler banner, an alarm clock, something, people can skip ahead. But yeah, so generally my opinion is that the second season has the opportunity to fix a lot of the problems that I found with part 2. My main problem with part 2, as I probably already said, is pacing. The way the story is told, the way the story develops, it flows, how we keep flashing back and forward, changing perspective. That is really frustrating in the game, especially because you are existing as that character, and then control is taken away from you and you are experiencing something else entirely. And I think the show has the opportunity to tell that same story, with a few minor changes, but in a more effective way. And it seems to me like they are already doing this, because again, without going into any spoilers just yet, but it looks like they're telling events in a more of a chronological order, where like the game starts with this bang, and then we flash back to some of the moments that we've already seen play out here in the show. Like some of the stuff that we see in this first episode, you don't see in the game until the end of the game. So I think that's going to go a long way into making the story a bit tighter, a bit stronger, a bit easier to follow. And also, we established Abby at the very beginning. And most importantly, we established their mission. That's very different, because in the game, we don't really know what their deal is for the first few hours of the game. And then stuff happens that we won't go into, but their objective is revealed. But now, exactly like the first scene in the new show, is establishing their mission. They want to kill Joel. And I think that creates tension. Based on this premise, I'm guessing the events are going to play out a bit differently. And I am super down for that.
Yeah. And where's Abby's muscles?
I mean, they toned it down because there's no human being who looks like that.
There's toning it down, and there's like, I mean, she's so tiny. She's like the character who portrays Abby in this series is.
I mean, we haven't seen her without the coat. Maybe in those 5 years she built some muscle.
You think she's packing under there? Do you?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm fine with the change, honestly.
I think you're right. It's good they're establishing the motives of this group straight away.
Yeah.
And I actually, when the episode started, I was like, hey, actually, I need to go back and watch the last episode, because I was like, maybe we've been introduced to these characters already, because it was really throwing you straight into it. But they hadn't. And immediately, I was already slightly put off in this first scene, though.
Okay.
I cannot stand it. And I was thinking this about, we were talking about Alien Romulus as well. I cannot stand it when there's these characters or these actors in series, especially post-apocalyptic stuff, and all their hair and makeup is like perfectly done. They look, they all look pristine. They all look like actors. They all look like models.
Yeah, they look nice.
Abby's crew in the beginning, it's like, oh, these are the Vogue runway models or something like that. It is like, I don't believe them to exist in this post-apocalyptic world. And yeah, like I said, this is a similar issue I had with Romulus when it introduces these teenagers and they do that silly thing where they put a little bit of dirt on their face and it's like, well, hey, yeah, they're tough and they're grizzled.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I want to be fair. I want to try to be fair
Yeah.
to the show, that maybe, like, these are, as you said, they are teenagers. They live in Salt Lake City, and up until recently, up until Joel came, this is probably was a very safe space for them. They were the sons and daughters of these fireflies who Joel slaughtered. These are characters who are at this time in the story not really versed in fighting. I guess, I agree that they look too nice.
It's just a simple costume design element most of the time, and obviously casting helps too. And hey, we've only seen these characters for 2 scenes so far in the first episode. They could totally warm on me, but immediately that was like my first thought. I was like, these kids look like they're straight off the Hollywood set. Do you know what I mean? I didn't believe them as survivors of this post-apocalyptic world. And then we have our next scene. We're back with Joel, and we have him. I think he's fixing like a circuit breaker or something. And Dina comes in and chats to him. Now, I want to ask you: is this?
I like Dina.
Dina's cool. Is this part of the games? Does Joel go through therapy in the game?
Oh my God! So I have some random thoughts that I wrote down while I was watching, and one says Joel going to therapy is good and bad at the same time. And no, it wasn't in the game.
I didn't think it was. So
No, it wasn't in the game, and neither was his relationship to Dina, who is now someone that he relies on because Ellie doesn't talk to him. So, and these are fine additions. I guess it's good that this lady can practice even when society has fallen.
Yeah, this again is,
it's weird.
Like we've mentioned, there's a big softening of Joel's character. It was in season 1, and it feels like they are really highlighting that in the beginning of season 2. We've already seen him crying in this therapy session. He's alluding that he's also ashamed of having therapy as well to Dina, and he goes to this therapy session with Kevin McAllister's mum from Home Alone.
Oh yeah, that was what's her name?
Something, I can't remember her name actually. Catherine something.
Christine O'Hara.
Oh, Christine O'Hara. That's
something
it.
O'Hara.
Yeah. Catherine O'Hara. That's it. Yeah, who's a good actress, but he goes he pays her a bag of weed for this therapy session, and she ends up sitting there and scolding him till he cries.
because he killed her husband, because I guess he was infected and he had to,
he should be like, bitch, I paid you for this session. Don't be trauma dumping on me.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get that. I don't know. It was weird when the scene started and I understood what was happening. Everything that is new jumps as being an addition, and you need to figure out if that addition works, what it adds to the story, what it detracts from the story. And I think the world the show is set in is brutal post-apocalypse. And I understand that Jackson is kind of like a safe haven, so people are living their lives almost normally.
Yeah.
And there's space for therapy. There's space for exploration of grief. And it's good that Joel is trying to better himself in this way. He clearly carries a lot of guilt for what he did, even though I think he believes he did the right thing.
Oh yeah, but that's, I feel like that's very obvious within his character, and I feel like this, having him actually do therapy, is not very subtle in exploring that.
Yeah, they could have had a scene where he talks to his brother over a drink, like I think it happens in the game. And I think, you could have a way more powerful scene if the character that Joel is confessing this stuff to is, someone we know, someone we care about, like Tommy, not just a random therapist who scolds him.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a weird choice. And I'm not sure whether maybe this is in the next scene we get with Joel. He is he's planning, he's looking at some maps, and Tommy's wife comes over to him and
I have a note on this.
She fucking scolds him again, and it's like, oh my God, is this just like the shit on Joel episode? And he's like, he's saying very,
everyone hates him.
Yeah, he's saying very practical and real things. It's like, hey, we have a small settlement and very limited resources. We can't just let everybody in, and it's already stressed that they are at almost capacity. and they're struggling to build housing for these people. But then Tommy's wife comes in, who's, I guarantee in every scene that she's in, she's going to be right about everything. And she comes in, she's like, remember, Joel, you were a refugee once too. And it's like, yeah, I get what you're trying to say, but it's like he also has a completely valid opinion.
And I have another note here because I just rewatched season 1, right? And in season 1, when Joel and Ellie get to Jackson, they run into Tommy's wife first, and she isn't even sure she wants to let them in. She has gone from, I don't want anyone in this colony because we have limited resources, to all of a sudden now it's like, hey, Joel, have a little heart. These refugees need our help. And I find that frustrating. Like, you can't change a character.
Yeah, and obviously they're having the discussion between them two. The show is telling us that she's right in this opinion as well.
Yeah.
It totally feels that way. And also, so in between those scenes we had, which is a scene I actually quite liked, was Ellie learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And she's practicing Jiu-Jitsu on these guys, and she's a little beaten up. I always like it when, especially if you've got a character who's, not very strong or physical in stature, you have to tell us how she beats these people in hand-to-hand combat. You can't just expect that we would believe that, I think. And even if they're not necessarily physical in stature, you should always see people learning these skills, whether they go out hunting and they're practicing their shooting, or whether they're practicing their hand-to-hand combat. So I actually really like this scene. But then also at the end, she catches the guy in an armbar and she doesn't let go. She's basically potentially going to snap this guy's arm. And again, I feel like the show is trying to be like, oh, isn't she so cool? She doesn't let go of the submission.
They need to establish her as a fucking badass because she is gonna do things in this season.
Oh, totally. And that's why you set her up as learning jiu-jitsu and stuff like this. But showing her not releasing the submission on the guy, and she's like, oh, whatever. And the guy's like, stop, he tapped out. And if you do that in a jiu-jitsu competition, you're a fucking dick.
Yeah.
And it makes her very unlikable.
I think we'll see what happens with Ellie this season. I'm very curious to see it because I think it's the point to show her as being a little bit of a dick. She's being a dick to everyone. Yeah. She's being a dick to Joel. She's not being a dick to Dina because she wants to fuck her.
Yeah. And is that something in the beginning of the game after we pick up of, what's happened at the end of the first one? Is that something that Ellie's character is going through? Is she very much like that in the game too at the beginning?
She's a 19-year-old teenager who has very repressed trauma, I guess. So yeah, she does lash out from time to time. I think it's more of an unrequited rage, like kind of like bubbling up inside. It's less on the surface like it is in this rendition of the character. It's a little bit more subtle. But again, the subtlety comes from the fact that the game can indulge in a lot of moments that we probably will not see in the show. Moments that are just pure gameplay of maybe two characters chatting while you are solving a puzzle, and you kind of like go into this character's psyche a little bit more. Here, they need to, right out of the gate, show you, okay, Ellie has grown up. She has issues. She has issues with Joel that we need to get into, and she is prepared for the world out there, the dangerous world out there. She's able to take care of herself, not like in the first game and show.
And like it is correct for her character. They've set this up in season 1. She has only killed a few people up until the point when she breaks out of the cannibal group. That's the first time she really goes on a bit of like a murderous spree. And that's, as a teenager, that would affect you completely. And it makes sense why she's got such hardened edge in the beginning of this episode. But you can do characters with that hardened edge and they still come across as likable.
Yeah.
For some reason, she's really unlikable in this first episode. And I get that's kind of the point, but you can still enjoy a character that's unlikable.
Yeah, show her have fun a little bit more. Like you show her play the guitar and do some stuff that we like about Ellie. Maybe be nice to the horse. Do something with the horse. I don't know. Yeah. Because the horse, is in the game, is Shimmer.
But it's so true though. You could give one scene of her like affectionately petting that horse, and it's like, oh, there you go. There's the Ellie that we know.
Yeah, I don't know. it's a very difficult season for Ellie and for Bella Ramsey. She worked in the first season, as I said. I really liked her performance, and I hope she'll work in the second season. She has proven that she's a great actor, but she needs to pull off a level of brutality and a level of like depth in the way she feels about stuff that we'll see if she can carry that, because it's a very difficult character to develop that way.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough, and it's not a side we've necessarily seen from Bella Ramsey's performance yet. So it's gonna be like a bit of a make or break for that character, I feel like. And then so we get Ellie desperately wanting to go on the next recon patrol. You know, she's practicing her shooting with Tommy, and she manages to convince him to go out on their next patrol, which is something she's obviously very keen on doing. There's, many people in this community. There's, they're overloaded, in fact, and they can't even house these people. And on our patrol, we have 2 adults and 3 teenagers. And again, thought that was a bit silly. You have these 2 guys who are the only ones who look like the adults on this patrol, and they don't say a fucking thing. They just sit back and they're like, the one guy says one thing. He's like, "Are you gonna let her do this?" And it's like, you could probably do something about it too, buddy. I think you've probably been on many a patrol in your life. So,
dude, they just put them there so that people like you wouldn't complain. Oh, they're just sending 2 teenagers to do the patrol, and you're complaining anyway.
Because it's even worse if you just chuck them in as fucking cannon fodder, because it doesn't make any sense.
Oh man!
And the whole situation in the house when Dina and Ellie go in to sort of explore what's happened.
The little supermarket.
Yeah, they all just stay outside the whole time. There's no aiding from them at all. I just thought that was also a bit silly.
I mean, it was a little bit silly, but it led to the best fucking scene in the whole episode. I was nerding out when I realized what they were doing, because, if you play the game, you know that they steadily introduce new classes of zombie.
Yeah.
Let's call them zombie in the game. And the stalker is a motherfucker that is introduced in part 2. And it was so well done. Like the way you see the silhouette of this.
It like scuttles across the top of the aisles at the beginning, doesn't it? It's great.
And you realize, oh wait, it's not just attacking. It's a stalker. I was like, oh, it literally just. I was like, oh, it's a stalker. And then they have the scene later when they're explaining, and it's like, oh, it was like stalking. I was like, you didn't need that. We got it. But like, It was so cool, and the makeup was so well done. I don't know, man. That sequence was fucking amazing.
Again, like we said, when the clickers are in it, the tension is so high, and what the show should be doing.
Yeah.
And just before we get more into that, there was a scene just before that, which was actually probably my favorite bit of the episode, where Dina and Ellie are sort of silently discussing their plans. And Dina's like, we'll go up behind and we'll stab one of them. And they start doing like a funny, like pretending to stab their own necks and like fake dying. And that, like, again, that's where Ellie's charm really comes out.
The personality comes out, and Dina is also really good.
Yes,
I think the actor playing her really, really pulls it off.
Yeah, that one little moment kind of sold me on their friendship already at this point, and I really appreciated that. Well, I didn't really understand the bit where she throws the bottle to distract the clicker.
Yeah, that's a game moment.
I get that, but then she throws the glass bottle to distract the clicker, and then she just walks over the broken glass.
Yeah, that was
making loads of noise.
That wasn't, that's not how I did it in the game, but I am, I'm very good at the game. You throw the bottle away so they go somewhere else, and then you do your thing.
Yeah, I mean,
you either
that's the logical thing to do. Of course, you don't throw the noise making thing at your feet to then make more noise.
Yeah. But the clicker was distracted enough that she was able to jump on it and stop it. So I guess it worked out. But yeah, the logistics.
It was weird. I thought it was almost like a mistake that she made. It was like, oh, she didn't throw it far enough or something, but then she's successful anyway at taking out the clicker. Like, so I don't know.
And I was expecting Dina to do something, and then she just comes after.
And they do a close up on her feet cracking on the glass, and it's like, oh, okay, she's fucked up. She didn't throw it far enough, and now the clicker's going to turn around and attack her. But then she just jumps on his back and kills it. I thought that was a really weird setup for a scene. That one.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't really catch that in the moment, but yeah, that's a very good point. But yeah, this leads to her falling through the floor, and then the stalker sequence, which again, as I said, was amazing. That's the kind of fun service that I love. It's not It's not there just to appease fans of the game. It's there because it services the story. You're introducing a new threat that they're going to have to deal with in the show, and it's super well done.
Hopefully this is setting up that we are, the Stalker is going
Seeing
to
more,
become a big
yeah.
threat in this season, and we are going to get more clicker scenes, hopefully.
I mean, if they do all the monsters that we run into the game, well, I guess that's more of a season 3 thing. But like, there's an infected coming who's absolutely terrifying.
I think I know. Is it the Rat King one?
Yeah, the Rat King.
Yeah,
Man,
yeah,
dude.
that could be cool.
Yeah, I can't wait for them to adapt that.
Yeah, and like you said, we got the bloater in season 1, and that scene was epic as well. And then if you get the first introduction of the clickers, and now we get the Stalker, like, yeah, they need to be focusing a bit more on that stuff. And I get it, that probably makes the show so much more expensive, and they've got to weave those scenes in sporadically. But that's such a large part of the show.
There's a lot of stuff that I appreciated from the game. You mentioned that bit where Tommy is teaching Ellie how to use the sniper rifle.
Yeah.
And that's like an entire sequence that you play as Ellie in the game. It's a tutorial basically. And it's nice that they reference it, even though, the setting is different and what happens in it is different. It's just a conversation, but they clearly want to pay homage to those little moments. And, again, the bottle, even though they used it wrong, all those things are there for us, for the fans of the game who are watching. And they also make sense for anyone who's watching who's not a fan of the game. It hasn't played the game.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, definitely. And then what kind of happens after this bit? I know we maybe get the I think we get the sort of the barn dance kind of party.
So yeah, the barn dance, that is another sequence that was taken straight from the game.
Right.
It's, I think, one of the first trailers that they did for season for the game.
So the guy who comes in and he the obligatory homophobe, is that from the game then?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
But I don't think you see the scene, or well, you see it later because, again, fractured timeline of events, that you see a moment and then you see the continuation of that moment 5 hours later. I guess it shows how I hate this in the game. But yeah, here they show the whole moment of the dance, and she dances with Dina, and then there's this guy kind of ruins the moment and calls him a bad word. And yeah, that's in the game too. I don't think it plays out exactly the same. I don't remember it.
Is it also a bit of a dumb scene in the game?
I mean, to be honest, I didn't find it that dumb. It makes sense that there would be an old man who is kind of like against same-sex love. He's drunk, it's a New Year's Eve party. He sees two young ladies smooching, and he's like, oh, this is a family event. I kind of get that the character like that would exist in this world. I mean, they exist in our world, so why wouldn't they exist in the post-apocalypse?
I mean, yeah, I get that. It's more, I mean, it's the choice to do the scene is rather, I could totally accept that.
It's virtue signaling again.
It is, and I think, and it's not necessarily something that's going to play a massive role, other than the fact that I'm sure we're going to get Dina and Ellie's relationship that's going to flourish. But the fact that some people in the commune are homophobic, like, that's not going to play. It's just a scene, let's get this guy to say something homophobic and be like, yeah.
He says something homophobic, and then Joel swoops in.
Yeah, and we get another scolding for Joel here. It's the third one of the episode.
Don't protect me. Don't save my life. I don't need you. You suck. But yeah, like, I found it interesting that I think in the game, again, I haven't played it in a while. I'm planning on replaying it after the show has ended. But I do believe that you get a few moments from Joel where he's trying to come to grips with the fact that Ellie is homosexual. And I thought that was a very interesting, because it would make sense. He was a carpenter before,
Whoa. Don't you fucking Jesus was a carpenter, bro. Don't you shit on carpenter.
I mean, like, I'm not saying, it's just, it makes sense that someone like him who has led the life that he led would have, like...
Yeah, I mean, isn't he from Texas, the character?
Yeah, he's yeah.
Again, not suggesting that all people from Texas are homophobic, but I get it. He's from that generation. It would, yeah.
Yeah, he's from the generation where maybe this thing was less, discussed.
Yeah,
I mean, and it's a human moment to show him kind of like come to grips with this reality and trying to accept Ellie for who she is.
But they definitely wouldn't want to have that plot line with this version of Joel, this is a more sensitive version of Joel, and I don't think they'd want to paint him out in potentially that light.
The fact that he, clearly just supports her, no questions asked, is a weakness, I think. I'm saying this not because I want to see it, but because it clearly is something that is important to the people making this show. If you want to address these kind of topics, then do it through your main characters. Don't throw a homophobic guy in a scene for 1 second.
Exactly.
So, it's an interesting topic of conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a way to do that. And like you said, it should be through important characters, not little offhand comments, which will probably never be referenced again. Then we got this weird little shot, and I couldn't quite work out what was happening. We get like some of the cordyceps. Are they like in the water supply?
So
Is that what that was?
So basically, they make a point to show at the beginning of the episode that they are trying to rework some of the piping in Jackson. They ask Joel for help, and they show that there's like a bunch of vegetation growing through the pipes. So this links back to how they changed the cordyceps biology in the show compared to the game, right? Because in the game, it's just spores. You enter a room, there's a dead, infected body, it releases spores, you breathe them, and you're dead. Or, well, you become an infected too. So, there's sequences in the game where you have to put on a mask, and then the mask breaks, so you need to run. And there's a bunch of stuff that happens in the game that is not in the show. I guess they decided that it wasn't realistic enough, that people would be able to just walk around and not get infected, like the spores would be everywhere.
If it's airborne, it would be, it would seemingly be everywhere. I think that was a good change, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a good change. So they changed the way the cordyceps works, and there's this weird fungus that grows out of the infected mouth, and kind of like reaches out to infect everything else.
Yeah.
And you can see that there's like these roots, like these fungus roots. I don't know if that's the right definition, but like these roots are connected to the cordyceps. They are connected to the infected. So if like they make a point of establishing in the first season that if you stomp on a cordyceps root in one room, a cordyceps a mile away could hear you and come, eat you up. So I think, based on what they've shown us, that they are establishing the fact that these pipes contain the cordyceps. The cordyceps is going to feel the presence of humans in Jackson, and there's going to be a horde of infected coming there and attacking them, which is something that kind of happens in the game, but it's just like there's infected outside of Jackson, and you happen to be outside of Jackson, and you need to fight them off. But here, I think they're going to have to literally save Jackson from the infected, and in doing so, they'll run into Abby and her group, and that's how the story is going to kick in.
Yeah, okay, cool. I did. I was thinking, I was like, oh, right, because the water's passing through the cordyceps, is now the whole town going to get infected or something? And I was like, well, that sounds like it's going to be...
those pipes didn't have any water in it. Yeah, no. It was just an old pipe containing the cordyceps, kind of like spreading around.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I can see that being the case then. And then we get a cutback to Abby and her team of child soldiers going through the woods, and they get to the edge of a cliff, and they can see Jackson in the distance. And we do a nice little track in on Abby's face, and ooh, she's so scary.
Yeah, she's so scary. She's so angry.
Yeah. And then that was the end of that episode.
Really solid start. The controversial stuff is yet to come. We have to see how they're going to handle that. The beginning is easy. We're happy to be back in this world, back with these characters. Pedro Pascal is doing a great job, as always. He brings this softness to the character, which I think works when they're not pushing it, like, because, he's a psychopath. But
that's not the character, though. It's a different character to Joel in the games.
Yeah. I mean, I love Joel in the game. This is a different Joel. But I think Pedro's performance works for what it is. I think, all the characters are a little bit different.
Yeah, totally.
And that's fine. And I don't want the same thing. I have the game. I can play whenever I want.
See, you say that, but then the best scenes from season 1 are shot for shot. Dialogue for dialogue.
Yeah, because those are the best scenes overall, because they're so well done, and they're so well performed and well written, and they make sense, and everything else is just adding up to that and making those moments shine. I know what you're saying. It's a story-driven game. If you want to adapt it, just make the same story. Like, it's not like Fallout, where you can just make up a new story in that world, and that works. It's not like Halo, even though Halo, I didn't watch it, and I don't think it was very good. Did they cancel that?
I think they've cancelled it, and I've seen so many like clips from that where like Master Chief is like butt naked and like having sex with people, and it's like, what is going on in this show?
Oh wait, that sounds good.
You see Master Chief's cheeks in it, his butt cheeks.
Master Cheeks.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And you're
Gotta
like,
love that.
and also he like barely ever has his helmet on. I think, you know, I'm never gonna watch
Oh
it.
man,
But
is this a Robert Downey Jr. Doom performance kind of thing?
But yeah, it's yeah, like you said, it's an adaptation. You know, it's really good. There's bits you can add which can really flesh out the characters' backstories. And actually, I was going to mention from season 1 when we're talking about sort of the cordyceps and the different types of clickers that we get. I love the addition in season 1 where we're cutting, especially in the first few episodes, where we're cutting to the news stories.
Oh yeah,
we have the sort of panel talk show where we get the exposition of what the fungal infection is.
that's the cold open
Yes.
of the first episode. It's the actor from The Mummy.
Yeah.
Who plays
Jonathan something, I think.
Rachel Weisz's brother.
Yes.
Hannah something. Like,
Rich.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
he's very good.
He's
He's
good.
very good. He plays this specialist and he explains what the fungus is and how it works. And I thought that was such a brilliant way to start the episode, to start the show. And we have spoken about The Last of Us for so long. We haven't mentioned Craig Mazin, who's the showrunner and the writer for most of the episodes of the second season, I think. He is the guy who made the Chernobyl miniseries.
Okay.
And he is, I think, is a great talent. It was a perfect pick for The Last of Us. And I think some of the issues that we have with the story are mostly Neil Druckmann, who's the games director. He has a very specific agenda that he clearly wants to push, and sometimes that's to the detriment of the story that he's telling.
Yeah.
And I think Craig Mazin is going to be the guy who kind of like reins him in. It's like, okay, you know, we love your story, but let's try to tell it a little bit better. You know, like let's put it in chronological order so that it makes sense and people are not frustrated. And yeah, so I think.
Did he also write the first season as well then? Craig
Yeah. He was the showrunner
Okay.
in season 1 too. So yeah, he is I think he's the creative mind that will make this show, you know, the best show it can be. I don't know. We'll see what they do. You know, I think some of the changes that they've done we can attribute to him and his sensibility to, you know, storytelling.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a tough job on this second season, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Because obviously, yeah, like we said, a lot of controversial moments didn't go down well in the game. Well, we'll get into a bit of a spoiler section here.
Yeah.
Because we know what happens in part 2 of the games. We can discuss what
Unfortunately,
we think.
we do.
Exactly. We can discuss what we think might happen in this second season. Yeah, so do you want to start us off? I suppose our main topic is, you know, the main scene where Abby kills Joel with the golf club.
Yeah.
Do we think that's going to happen this season? Because Pedro Pascal is featured so heavily in the marketing of this show. Are they going to want to get rid of him? You know, I think maybe this is going to be the finale of this season, or they'll have a cliffhanger and leave it for season 3 so they can still use him to promote the next season.
Kind of like Walking Dead bat moment with
Negan, yeah.
Negan, yeah. Okay, so they've already said it's gonna be 3 seasons. I mean, there's gonna be a 3rd season, so it's pretty safe to assume part 2 is gonna be split into at least 2 parts. I mean, there's enough story there for 3 more seasons of this TV show. So I guess they can decide how much they want to adapt each time, but definitely 2 seasons. So yeah. The way they're telling the story makes me think that yes, probably what they want to do is to end on like a big cliffhanger moment, and that moment needs to be Joel's life being in danger. And I don't know, like I feel like you know, sometimes the fact that an actor is very popular puts a show or a movie in a weird spot where they don't really want to kill the actor, but even though it would service the story to kill the character, you know, like I'm thinking about Han Solo in the original trilogy of Star Wars. You know, he wanted to die in the second one, but then they brought him back and he did nothing in the third one. But I think the fact that Pedro Pascal is as popular as he is kind of works to the benefit of this show, because they want to have to keep him around for as long as possible. And I think even when what happens, we're going to still see him a lot, like in a bunch of flashbacks, a bunch of moments that inform Ellie's journey through her relationship to Joel. So yeah, I think now we're gonna get Abby's group running into Joel and Ellie and everyone at Jackson, I guess. And I think there's gonna be this tension that we have in the show thanks to that first scene that establishes that their goal is to kill Joel, which wasn't in the game, and I think that's a great improvement. But there's gonna be this tension where, for a few episodes at least, Abby is not gonna know that Joel is Joel, and she's gonna find out later, right? Because that's something that was kind of like on my wish list for the game. When I finished it, I was like, oh, I wish they did this, I wish they did that. Maybe, you can establish Abby as a character before making her do the most horrible thing that has ever been done. So the way they're gonna do that, I think Abby's gonna get to know Joel, get to know Ellie, maybe even develop a friendship of some sorts, and then shit is gonna go down. We're gonna establish the WLF, the faction that they come from. Isaac is gonna be one of the main villains of the season. I think he's gonna be played by Jeffrey Wright, who also plays him in the game, by the way, even though he's a very minor character and very inconsequential to the story. But I think they're going to beef up his role in this. So yeah, we're going to build up to a moment that's going to come later in the show, and the tension is going to come more from Abby's relationship to the characters and what happens when she finds out that Joel is Joel.
Yeah, you can certainly execute that moment better if you set up Abby's character before it
Execute. Oh, wow. Was that intended? That was really good, man.
Yeah, we'll see. But you know what I was thinking when we were watching the first episode, though? I was like, because Joel's in it so little, unless we're going to get a very Joel-centric episode in the next one or two, maybe they are already establishing this is now going to be Ellie's show. And maybe that moment is going to happen sooner than we think. But yeah, I still do believe Pedro Pascal's too big of an asset to the show to lose.
There's another moment that they can use of kind of like a cliffhanger to transition into season 3, and that's the confrontation in the theater. We're talking about spoilers so people know what I'm referring to, but I think that you run into the same issue that we had with the game. In the game, 2 hours in, Abby kills Joel. Everyone is very sad. Everyone is very angry. Ellie is very angry. And that works because, her anger is your anger. So you start playing the game thinking about revenge. Okay, I need to find this Abby motherfucker and fucking kill her. You embark on this journey with Dina, and then stuff happens. And you play this whole section. It's like 10 hours of gameplay as Ellie, and then you get to this theater, and that's where the confrontation with Abby happens. Not much of substance happens before that. You're just kind of like going place to place, finding clues to where Abby might be. You find one of her friends, you kill them because it's a miserable experience of a game, and then you find Abby. Abby finds you, and there's this confrontation in the theater, and then before you can see how that confrontation is resolved, you switch perspective to Abby. And you play as Abby on something that is almost completely unrelated to the story that you've just experienced for a good chunk, like another 10 hours, before you go back to that fucking moment in the theater. People hated that. I mean, I hated that. A lot of people hated that because, as I said, it's pacing. If you truncate a moment like that, and then force me to play as a different character doing a different thing, I'm not going to care that much because I want to go back to that moment. I want to go back to the character that I care about, and it's not going to work. I mean, it worked for some people. I respect that, but it didn't work for me. So I don't think they're going to do the same thing in the show of just getting to that moment and then be like, oh, I'll see you next year, because then people are going to be pissed off. Thinking about the story of the game and assuming that they haven't changed much of the story, I think the moment that you want to end on is Joel's death. Maybe changing a bit of what happens in the middle. There's going to be a different quest, a different storyline where Abby can kind of like grow close to Ellie and the other characters, and then
Yeah. And like what you, because you mentioned the bit where we switch. You've done 10 hours of sort of with Joel and Ellie, and then we switch and we play as Abby in part 2. I saw somebody's done quite a good little compilation of Ellie's killing all these dogs, and then I think in that opening scene with Abby, she gets to pet the dog and be like really cute with the dog, and it's like you are forcing me to really like this person, and the decision behind it, like Neil Druckmann's decision behind that, is so bizarre. It's like, why would you shit on your legacy characters that made this what it was, and you'd happily just rather be like, oh yeah, no, Abby's our favorite character now, that's how this story goes. It's like, no, you don't get to decide that, Neil Druckmann.
People decide that. And Joel was my profile picture for like 5 years when I was a teenager, so I decide that I like him more.
Exactly. Now your profile picture's Abby, isn't it?
Yeah, on every social media app. It's always been Abby, and it always will be. No, but in all seriousness, I think the actress they chose has a very thankless job of kind of like bringing this character to life, because people are gonna just from the get-go hate her. And I don't hate the character. I think, the game makes you care about her towards the end. It's just so heavy-handed, and I'll get into that in my video. Again, little plug, but we'll see what they do with it.
Yeah, cool. So if you were to give the first episode a little score, obviously we're grading it on just an episode so far, but do you think it was a good return to the series?
I was happy to be back. It was interesting. I really loved all the little nods to the game and the recreation of some of the sequences. The ball was basically shot for shot. The way the camera pans down and shows Ellie kind of like watching over the room with all the lights. It's just beautiful imagery that it's translated almost shot for shot from the game. And all the new stuff works for the most part. I wasn't a huge fan of Joel going to therapy, but I guess that's what he does. Tommy's wife, I find her a bit annoying.
I also forgot about the scene when Ellie and Dina, they're reporting back in the council meeting, and Tommy says, you weren't following the rules. You shouldn't have even gone into the building. And then Ellie or Dina goes, well, how is that different to you and Joel going in? And then Tommy's wife turns around and backs him up straight away. And she's like, yeah, how is that different, Tommy?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God. So you're now condoning these 19-year-old teenage girls who, one of them's going on their first patrol to go in headfirst into danger. It's like, you're an idiot.
It's not even...
Again,
yeah, I totally agree, because it makes no sense for her to be like, oh, girl power. Hey, yeah, like they can do anything a man can do. Yeah, I know, I guess, but like, a man would be in danger in that situation too, so you should be worried.
And you can have statements like that and it works. Like, when Ellie and Dina are about to go into the building and Ellie says to Dina, oh, well, should we leave this for the men to do?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's a good moment because she wants to be that. Like, she wants to be...
She's always trying to prove herself. Yeah. Whereas the council, Tommy's wife, she should be more of a protective role and should be more sensible and adult. And it's like, no, Tommy and Joel can do these things because they've been on many patrols and, they've proven themselves as great warriors.
And they've gruesomely killed a bunch of people. So
yeah, and it was, like you said, it was a girl power moment. And it's like, why is this in the show?
Girls, get it done. And it's so unnecessary. I like these characters, as they are. I don't need to be reminded of their gender like it's something like a badge of honor. It's strange that they keep needing to do this, but I guess, it pays off.
I can only hope Tommy's wife does not appear in too much of the rest of the series because, oh my God.
They're going to be away from Jackson for most of it, so I believe we're safe.
She is grating on me. I liked the first episode of the second season.
Oh, sorry, you asked me for a grade and I just went on a fucking tangent. But like my grade, yes, it's like a 7.5, 8-.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. I think again, I'd give it, which is classic. Whenever we fucking review anything, I feel like I give it a little bit less than yourself. Yeah. I probably don't have as much stake in the series and the characters as yourself because I'm not as I didn't love the games as much as yourself, so I don't know whether that's maybe adds to my I'm less excited about the show and less excited about where it goes. This one I'm very interested to see if it will be a bit of a car crash like the game was. But I'd give this maybe a 6.5 out of 10. It's good. It's obviously, besides it's incredibly well made, all really well shot, well acted. Again, as we always say, it's the character decisions and plot decisions which I'm not necessarily loving at the moment. And obviously, the pilot episode of season 1 starts off with so much more of a bang. Yeah, if we're comparing the two, season 1 opener was fantastic, whereas we're back in the world.
It's just a continuation. Yeah. And also, I think this is something that permeates the whole experience of watching the show, because with season 1, I was watching week by week and enjoying it and being like, please let it be just like the game. Like there were certain moments that I was waiting for. I remember when the last episode came and like the first half hour, I was like, if you don't do the moment with the giraffes, I'm gonna fucking riot. I'm gonna go into the street, just fucking put stuff on fire, because I need that moment to be replicated. And they did, and it was amazing, and I was really happy. So the experience of watching season 1 was more of like, please be like the game, so that people who haven't played the game can see how great the game was. Now it's a different experience because week by week I'm gonna be like, let's see how you can improve this. Let's see how
Yeah.
you can change this up. Let's see how, oh, you've changed this. Interesting. I guess, this is gonna affect how this happens. So it's gonna be a very different experience watching episode by episode, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and that alone is just really interesting of a topic because so many of these IPs get made into films and TV shows, etc. And more often than not, the source material is completely changed and everybody hates it. And whereas this second season, everyone's like, "Oh my god, don't do the source material, please, do something else."
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's the opposite of what we usually get.
Yeah, and I'm sure they will take some of that into account. So we'll see. We'll try and do a episode by episode sort of review here, and if we miss one, we'll do two at once. But we'll keep giving you updates on our thoughts of The Last of Us Season 2.
Yes.
And now we'll go to our usual section where we do our general catch-up of films and TV shows that we've seen and that we enjoyed, or maybe we didn't. So anything you've been watching or recently, Tommy?
So mine's not really a recommendation because I don't think you'll ever watch this, but I wanted to talk about Daredevil Born Again. I wanted to tell you all about it and hear your thoughts and see your reaction.
Yeah.
So you haven't really seen any of the Daredevil show, did you?
When the Netflix series first came out, I think I watched either just the first season or most of the first season, and I remember enjoying it, but just for some reason it just didn't grab me.
Yeah.
It felt a little bit low budget and to be honest, it's really well made still. It just didn't grab me. And when Daredevil Born Again came out again, I went back and watched some of the first season of the Netflix Daredevil, and I actually started to enjoy it more, so I think I will finish that first season. But not enough for me to catch up on all the Daredevil stuff to be up to date for Born Again.
That makes sense. Totally fair. I, on the other hand, love Daredevil. Fucking love Daredevil. I remember getting a Netflix subscription just to watch Daredevil. Netflix was the Daredevil app for like the first few months that I had it. Love Daredevil, even though it was low budget, as you said, even though, it was a little bit disjointed and disconnected from the larger MCU, which I was a huge fan of at the time. I found it really refreshing, really dark, really gritty, really bloody. The fight sequences, everything was just speaking to me. I love it. I love this rendition of Matt Murdock. I love this rendition of Wilson Fisk. Vincent D'Onofrio fucking kills it. So yeah, I was really looking forward to this new season. I'm happy that they're back, and I just finished watching the final episode of Born Again earlier today, and I like the show overall. I guess, even though it's silly, it's very silly in parts. I don't care that it's silly. It's Daredevil.
Controversial take there, Tommy.
I mean, it's a blind lawyer fighting crime in a red outfit. So I think it's silly, even when it's not.
Was the Netflix Daredevil silly?
It could be. There was a ninja cult that was trying to take over Manhattan. There was a woman who was resurrected in a sarcophagus. There was a hole in the city that led into, I don't even remember what, and they were trying to mine like dragon bones to make weapons. So, it could be silly.
The Netflix interpretation of Daredevil is very serious and very grounded.
That was what I loved about it. They nailed this element of Daredevil character, which is so fascinating to me. He's a blind lawyer. Justice is blind. He's also a devout Christian, but he dresses as a devil because he feels like this part of him is a sinner. He enjoys the idea of beating up criminals. He carries his father's spirit. He was a boxer. So there's all these elements really work super well, and Charlie Cox just nails the character. I can't see anyone else playing this character. He even voices Daredevil now in animated Marvel stuff. So I just love that. I just love that he's back as this character.
Yeah, and I do love it when superhero shows will take it seriously. The source material, it can be silly, but all the people who are fans take this stuff to some degree seriously. And like what we see in a lot of Disney stuff, they always have to reference like, oh, how silly the costume is, or how silly the name of this villain is. And it's like, no, we actually love that shit. So you think it's silly, but we actually enjoy it, and that shows a contempt for the source material.
Yeah, I hate that. I despise that. When I use the word silly, I'm not using it as an insult. I'm using it as to describe it.
On the surface, of course, it's ridiculous.
If you go into it
Yeah.
expecting Better Call Saul because he's a lawyer, you're not going to get that. You're going to get a very different show, but it's a fine show. But what I wanted to talk to you about, given our recent conversation on the MCU and whether or not the MCU is going to be back or not, and you had a very strong opinion that he's not going to come back. This is a case for me to say the MCU is kind of back, maybe a little bit.
Whoa.
No, I'm just trying to justify the rant that I'm gonna go into now because I want to tell you about this show. I think it's an interesting conversation that we're gonna have because this show has some very great moments and some of the dumbest shit that I've ever seen in TV. And some of this stuff happens within the span of like 10 minutes in the same fucking episode. It's so interesting how disjointed this show feels. And when you look at the whole thing, like I just finished watching the final episode and it just feels like a Frankenstein monster of a show. So this brings me to the production of Daredevil Born Again, and I want to ask you if you know anything about how this show was made.
Yes, I'm very aware of a lot of the background of the show. So I know that originally was shot very differently, and it was very different to the Netflix version. I don't think even Foggy or what's the lady's name?
Karen.
I don't think either of them were even in the Daredevil Born Again show, the Disney's interpretation one. And so I know they probably received some backlash for that, as obviously other MCU projects weren't very successful. And I know they did a lot of significant reshoots for this, and they brought those characters back to try and implement them in a big way in the story, to try and go back to a bit of the roots. And so that totally makes sense what you just said, that in one episode you can have a great scene and then a terrible scene straight afterwards, because it's probably written by, I don't know, several different people and made by so many different people.
Yeah, so the show started production in 2022. Then in 2023, the writer's strike halted production before the show was completed, but they already shot like 6 episodes basically. And during that strike, the higher-ups at Marvel and Disney reviewed the 4 episodes or 6 episodes that they had and decided to scrap the show.
Do you know what was behind that decision to scrap it?
So I guess they weren't satisfied with what they had. Basically, the show was more of a procedural, episodic. It was more like She-Hulk than the original Daredevil.
Oh, that's a great template to base your new show off. Yeah.
And I guess, given the reaction that people had to She-Hulk, they decided to retool it and make it into a direct continuation of the Netflix show, which I think they should have done from the get-go, honestly. So some of the showrunners, some of the writers, and some of the directors were also replaced, and the story was completely overhauled. But the old footage, they didn't want to throw that away, of course, so it's still in the show. And they mostly add stuff at the beginning and at the end. So the first episode is almost all of it new stuff. And then you have a little bit of new stuff sprinkled throughout the episodes coming after. And then the last 2 episodes are again completely new stuff that they shot recently. And you can tell so much. It's insane. It's so funny. It's like Fun 4-stick levels of, I can see the reshoots because Rooney Mara has a wig in the scene and she doesn't have a wig in this scene. It's insane. There's so much ADR to kind of make sense of where scenes are placed and characters show up, and it's a mess.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah, but there's some good stuff too. So Deborah Ann Woll, who plays Karen, and Eldon Henson, who plays Foggy, were brought back for a little bit. They are not in the show that much because they were replaced by new characters.
They featured heavily in the marketing of the film as well.
Yeah.
Which is a classic, but I mean, people hate that it's the bait and switch. You sell the audience on the promise of we'll be with these characters, and I think a lot of people hated Last of Us Part 2 for that reason too, because I know that they basically disappear for the whole season pretty much after that first episode.
I mean, I'm not going to go into the details of it because there's no point. But yeah, basically they show up at the beginning, then they disappear, and then some of these characters come back at the end because, of course, it was part of the reshoots. John Bernthal is reintroduced as Frank Castle, the Punisher. They have one scene in one episode at the beginning of the show, then he disappears completely and he comes back in the last episode. And I thought, again, the stuff that they do with him is amazing. It's so good, but it doesn't work that well because you haven't really built up to it. And I guess they will do a Disney Plus movie on the Punisher, so I guess they're setting up that. But yeah, it's weird. So we have two shows existing within one show, episode by episode, and sometimes, as I said, even within the same episode, you can feel these shifts in direction, in tone, in framing. It's not even necessarily worse or better, it's just different. Like from one episode, it's very bright, very colorful, very Marvel TV, and then the next episode is just this very artistic framing and coloring, and it's so different. It feels like it's two different shows. It's not terrible, as I said, and in part it's actually really good. So the good is that the performances are super strong and some of the fight sequences are pretty cool. Visually, the show mostly works, even though some of the CGI doesn't really hold up. Daredevil feels like a different character now that they have Disney Plus money, so they can leap from building like Spider-Man. It's a bit weird.
Yeah. I've seen a couple scenes of him like jumping around on rooftops, and he's fully CGI in some of those bits, and it looked terrible.
Yeah. It looks bad, and also it looks like CGI. And there's like a moment in the first episode where they want to have this cool scene of him just like jumping around on rooftops, but it's obscured and fog because I guess they knew that the effect didn't look that good. And then there's this scene where it's a very comic booky pose. He throws himself at this wall and then slides down. But like the way he slides down, it feels like they grabbed the PNG and just dropped it down a little bit. It was so weird, man.
Yeah.
But I guess that's more comic book accurate, so I can't really complain.
No, you can complain if it's an expensive show and it looks like shit.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fair.
So I want to tell you about 3 separate moments of bad dialogue, and I think that's going to be fun for us to go over. And this kind of gives us the opportunity to go over a little bit of the arcs that they do in this show. The main arc is Matt is not Daredevil anymore, and Wilson Fisk wants to become mayor. Spoiler alert, he becomes the mayor, even though, he's a criminal and everyone should know that, but that's not important. The first proper arc of the season has Matt representing a man named Hector Ayala, who's been accused of killing a cop by throwing him under a subway train, right? He didn't kill him. He was trying to help a guy who was being beaten by the police on the platform. But during the scuffle, one of the officers trips, falls on the train track, and gets hit by a train. Well, Hector is one of the best parts of the show. The actor passed away, actually, last year. So I think he did a fantastic job. He basically plays this vigilante character named White Tiger. I wish we got more of him in the show, which is a sentiment that permeates the whole experience because so many characters are introduced and then dropped and then they don't really care, and maybe they're going to do something with them in a following season. It's such a mess, man. This show is focused on Matt and Fisk. There's no much room for anyone else, which sometimes feels a little bit claustrophobic, I guess. But Hector is good. He's secretly this vigilante guy named White Tiger, but he wasn't wearing the costume, right? At the time of the incident, it was just going down the platform, trying to help this guy, and then the incident happens. So the fact that he's a vigilante is going to be used against him in court. It's actually a very interesting premise. So Matt is representing this guy, right? They are discussing the case. It's him, the judge, and the other prosecutor in a room. And they're like, oh, but he's a vigilante. And, this was vigilante justice, and we need to stop it. And Matt says, completely seriously, by Your Honor, he wasn't in possession of his mystical amulet. And that's a line of dialogue that Matt Murdock pronounces in front of a judge in the new Daredevil Born Again TV show.
And what's the judge's reaction to that?
They just take him seriously, and in part, I love this because it shows you, Daredevil is in this Marvel Cinematic Universe of people who can fly and have powers. So, a mystical amulet doesn't really sound that weird. But when you put it in a conversation that is really 100% serious, I was taken aback. I was really taken aback.
That's why Daredevil, as a character, always is better with the street level crime and the more grounded stories within the Marvel universe. Because you can't have a lawyer procedural show with all these. Well, I mean, She-Hulk tried to do it, have a procedural lawyer show with all these more fantastical elements in it, and it was stupid.
I mean, that can be an interesting premise. At one point there's a throwaway line. There's this guy that is in jail for robbing a store, and he was like, what if he was a Skrull? And it's like, that's interesting. It's interesting that in this world you have aliens who can shapeshift into anyone, and can people are gonna use it.
That
as a way.
must cause some serious legal issues. It's like, no, it wasn't me, it was a scroll.
Yeah. So, it's interesting that they have these kind of conversations because it links it back to the larger universe, but it still feels silly.
Yeah.
But this was one example of bad dialogue. There's another one, and it's in episode 5. Episode 5, you're going to love this, Tyler, because episode 5 is a bottle episode. It's one of the classic one-shot kind of comic book issue. Matt Murdock goes to the bank. He has to request a loan. It's St. Patrick's Day. Group of Irish robbers attacks the bank. He has to stop them without revealing his identity. I love the idea of an episode like this.
Yeah.
It's a type of episode that we kind of lost with the streaming shows, right? You series either feel like stretch out movies or have fewer episodes compared to older TV shows. So, these kind of inconsequential episodes with a fun premise, they're quite rare. So it's good. They even use the same bank as the film Inside Man. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, I love that film. Yeah.
Yeah, they use the same bank. Unfortunately, it's not as good as Inside Man.
I didn't think so.
Oh, no? What a surprise. The episode itself is actually quite dull and cliche. If you've ever seen a bank heist in a movie or a show, you've seen this one. We got the cop on the outside negotiating with the robbers leader on the phone and kind of like exchanging quips. We got Matt playing the silly blind man. He tricks the robbers, takes them out one by one, which is fine. And then we have a guest character in this episode, Tyler, that I'm really excited to tell you about. It's a guest character from the larger MCU that plays a big role. As we said, Daredevil is official in the MCU. He can now run into any character from the MCU. This opens up endless, exciting possibilities, Tyler. And what a better way to welcome our hero in a larger universe than for him to meet, drumroll please, Yusuf Khan, Kamala Khan's father, Miss Marvel.
You joking? I thought he was like being investigated for like some sexual...
Yeah, that too. That's weird too. Sexual stuff. Yeah, I don't know. But he's back.
What?
As Kamala Khan's father, and he wants you to know it. And he has some of the best dialogue in the show. So he spends the first few minutes of the episode kind of like repeating who he is in case you forgot or in case you haven't seen the stuff that he's in, which, is mostly everyone who hasn't seen Ms. Marvel. And
essential exposition, I'm sure he's giving there.
Yeah. So it's like, my daughter Kamala, she's in California visiting some friends there. La La Land, as they say. And then there's this line of dialogue that haunts me in my sleep. Later in the episode, he is forced to open the vault by the robbers. Matt manages to get down to him. He gets rid of a couple of the robbers and they are alone on the vault level. And he's trying to use his amazing earring to open the vault and get inside. And I'm going to try to replicate the gravitas that Yusuf Khan uses to say this line. He says, and I quote, "This vault has a 4-turn tumbler system, which means it has over 100 million possible combinations. You can't just crack it open like it's a piggy bank I gave Kamala to instill in her the value of saving."
Oh my God.
This is a line in the show. I had to stop and rewind because I was like, what am I even looking at? You can't just crack it open like it's a piggy bank I gave Kamala to instill in her the value of saving.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure Matt Murdock thought he was just gonna pop it open like a piggy bank. Oh my God, that's awful.
Okay, we're almost done, I promise. Another arc in the show revolves around this character named Muse.
He's like a serial killer in it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's one of the secondary villains in the show. He's a graffiti artist. Basically think Banksy if he was a psychopath. And he murders like 60 people in the show. He takes their blood and uses it to paint graffiti all over New York.
Okay.
Nobody catches him. Even if he has a very obvious hideout in an abandoned subway tunnel, nobody knows where he is. And he's slightly changed from the comics. I'm not familiar with his character from the comics, but basically he doesn't seem to have any superpowers that he does have in the comics. And this leads to them having to justify how he can fight Daredevil and keep up with him, which is something that we said earlier. We were talking about The Last of Us, and you said, you need to establish when a character knows, martial arts because that's important. And I agree somewhat, but you can do it in a good way and you can do it in a bad way. And I think they did it in a slightly comedic way. So basically, there's this very dramatic scene, and it's an intercut between Mayor Fisk, Vincent D'Onofrio's character, being informed about Muse's identity by a detective, and it's intercut with a scene where Muse himself, who's in civilian clothes, looks like a regular guy, is talking to a therapist. right? And the therapist, mind you, is another major character in the show. She's, of course, Matt Murdock's girlfriend.
I think I have heard about this scene, but go on.
Muse has decided that she's going to be his final victim. Of course, Matt Murdock's girlfriend, she's a therapist. And by the way, she not only is Muse's therapist, she also is Fisk and Vanessa's marriage counselor. So basically, she, for some reason,
This lady is in high demand, clearly, across
yeah,
New York City.
she's writing books. She does everything. It's insane. Anyway, in this scene, Wilson Fisk is sitting at his table, has the report in front of him, and he's reading the detective's report out loud to the detective like it's new information. It's like involuntary commitment when he was 15. Expelled, blah, 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 involuntary commitment when he was 17. Another one when he was 20. He certainly does have issues. And then the detective says, there is one more thing, sir. How familiar are you with Taekwondo?
What?
And then we shift to Muse and the therapist talking, and Muse is like talking to her, and is like remembering stuff from his past, his parents, and he says very gravely, "Did I ever tell you I used to compete in Taekwondo?"
Oh, Jesus.
And they make it this traumatic experience where his parents like forced him to do Taekwondo, so he basically is jacked and super strong against his will. Oh, by the way, as I said, he is visiting the therapist in civilian clothes, right? He's not Muse in this moment,
Yeah.
but they need him to be in costume in the next scene. So when he gets to the office, he has this huge bag with him where he keeps the costume. And like she doesn't even address it. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff that I love to hate because
Now,
who in the right mind?
does he fight like he does Taekwondo? I don't know whether you're familiar with it, but
I'm not super familiar with Taekwondo, but he's not a very good Taekwondo guy.
because Taekwondo is all about, like, there's a lot of crazy kicks and people with insane flexibility and lots of spinning kicks and things like that. And it's like,
Maybe he does one kick. I don't know, man. The fight was boring.
yeah, I can imagine that's just something they've said, and the writer doesn't have a clue what Taekwondo even is. They just know it's a martial art, and that establishes him as an excellent fighter straight away.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, as I said before, the problem with the show is that so many characters are introduced and then they just either die or they're dropped or like they don't really have any consequence. He is briefly introduced at the beginning of the show, then he disappears for a few episodes, then he comes back, Daredevil fights him, then he escapes, and then basically you have this sequence that I just described to you where he is at the therapist, and then the next scene is Daredevil going to him and they fight and then he dies. So like they basically had to, okay, we need to tell people that he knows Taekwondo because they're not going to be so confused about the fact that they're fighting. And I'm like, no, we're not going to be confused. It's just a guy and he fights him. It's okay. You don't have to say that he's Taekwondo artist. I don't know.
I think if obviously to a degree, Matt Murdock has superhuman abilities, but he doesn't have superhuman strength. So I don't need to have to be told necessarily how someone could go up against him. If you need that when a character is like Captain America and you see someone who's like normal going up against him, like they need to have that addressed especially. Yeah, that sounds really dumb. Like that's just bad writing.
Yeah, bad writing. And I think Muse in the comics, from my understanding, his power is that he can become invisible to anyone. Like he can hide his pulse. So basically, he is the perfect villain for Daredevil because he uses all the other senses but sight to kind of like find his opponents, and he becomes invisible to him. That would have been such a much more interesting and engaging way.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, we're already establishing more so in the Disney's version of Daredevil that we are in the MCU. There are more fantastical elements here, so why not give Muse those superpowers?
It was a missed opportunity. I guess maybe if they bring him back, but I don't think they will. And the last funny thing about this sequence of events is that Matt, at this point, he needs to find out what Muse's plan is, right? He doesn't know what he wants to achieve, to accomplish. So he goes to Muse's lair and he starts going through the sketches and the drawings because he's a graffiti artist. So, his lair is filled with like drawings and sketches and he's blind, right? Daredevil is blind. So the stuff on the page makes no sense to him. He can't make out any of the images that he could use as clues.
Did they forget he was blind in the show?
No. I mean, there's one scene where he's kind of like looking at the paper, and I'm like, did you forget he's blind? But no, he removes his glove and he tries to touch the stuff. We've established that he kind of is able to read writing on paper thanks to his super powerful fingertips. I don't know. He's looking through these drawings, right? He's touching them. He's trying to make out what they are. And then he comes across an acrylic painting. So, big crusty brush strokes you can feel on your fingers. And somehow he understands that the painting is her girlfriend's face. They even have this flash, like he touches the paint, and then he flashes back to that morning when he was touching her girlfriend's face, and he's like, oh
my
and he
God.
immediately understands that she's in danger, even though it makes no sense. And he runs and swoops in and saves her. So, yeah, these are just some examples. But it's actually a decent show.
Yeah. Something. Oh my God! You really haven't sold it to me there, Tommy.
Because all the stuff that I haven't told you about is actually pretty solid.
Well, there's a couple other bits that I know about that I thought I've seen little clips from it and that have been sort of made fun of on the internet. There's a scene where Bullseye, he goes to prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's complaining. He's like complaining about going into general population, and he's like scared about it. This dude's scared about going to a normal prison. He's supposed to be like one of the most badass assassins in the world. Why would that worry him at all?
I don't think he was necessarily scared. I didn't read that scene that way. He was surprised that they would release him into the general public part of the jail because he was in prison, but he was kind of like isolated because he's a very dangerous criminal.
Yeah.
And actually what happens in the show is that he's released there because they want him to escape. I guess he kind of like is figuring out why he would be put there. I don't know. I didn't find that moment especially egregious, to be honest. There's way more egregious moments, as you can tell from my rambling. But
I'm not sure whether it was a conversation between Daredevil and Muse or Daredevil and Bullseye, but he says to one of them at one point, he's like, I don't know whether I can trust you. Dude, you're a lie detector. You don't need to know whether you can trust anyone. You know when people are lying all the time.
Yeah. They forget about that when it's convenient.
Yeah, which is the whole best bit of his character, and it's like the core aspect of his lawyer and his crime fighting abilities. Yeah, it looks like a really bad show, to be honest. And I mean, obviously, you're saying it's got some great moments in it, and I'm sure, like, I know any scene where you have John Bernthal and Charlie Cox like chatting together, I'm sure those scenes are really good because they're really great and they're pre-established characters already. So
it's so strange because you can really go from a scene that means nothing to an amazing conversation between two great actors. Wilson Fisk, again, Vincent D'Onofrio is just chewing the scenery as this insane person, and his relationship to his wife, and then even Bullseye himself. I thought the actor, forget his name, he plays him very well. He's one of those guys. He has that stare where any scene he's in, you're like, okay, he's gonna kill everyone in the room. But yeah, it is just not enough. He's not in the show enough. He shows up at the beginning, goes to prison, comes back in the last 2 episodes to kick the plot into motion again. And in the meantime, we have all the things that I just mentioned to you. Stuff that doesn't matter, characters who die in a couple of episodes. There's this very interesting subplot with police officers using the Punisher symbol to prop them up and kind of like bring justice in a not very just way, which is something that really happens with military personnel and like police officers in America. So they want to address this kind of stuff, and they do. But again, it's like, oh, this police officer does something clearly wrong and outside of the law. And then you discover that he's a fan of the Punisher with a Punisher tattoo and Punisher symbol on his bullets. By the way, Matt is able to figure out that there's a Punisher skull on the bullets of this person, even though he's blind. And I'm like, can he just have a friend there telling him, oh, there's a Punisher logo on it? Like, why does he have to?
Well, that's what Foggy was there for.
Yeah, and they introduced this character named Cherry, who's like a retired police officer who basically is Foggy. Like, he's this like older man, but his function in the story is the same. He knows that Matt is Daredevil, and he tries to stop him from doing stupid shit throughout the show. And he has no personality whatsoever. It's so weird, man. It's feels disjointed. It feels like two shows.
Yeah. And there was something I've heard that apparently the whole religious element of his character is almost completely taken out of Born Again.
I was so disappointed in that.
And that makes so much sense because Disney hates God. So
And they're the Antichrist.
it makes sense why they would not reference that at all.
I mean, there is a couple of scenes. There is one specific scene in the early episodes that I really love when he's representing this white tiger guy in Kurt. And then when the earring is over, he's kind of like sitting on the benches and the light coming through and the way it's shot, it looks like it's a church. And he's like sitting for confession or something. And that's one of very few moments where he's religious. Like he has a cross pendant. He recites a prayer at some point, but that's it. He doesn't go into a church. He doesn't speak to any nuns or priests. It's that part of his character is it's toned down quite a bit.
Yeah, and that's a massive part. It's a massive part of his character.
Yeah, it's a massive part of what makes him interesting. Is the kind of tension between his willingness to hurt people and his Christianity, his faith. So yeah, disappointing in that. I guess they tried to change course halfway through, so we can pardon a subpar season because the intention is clearly to keep going.
Oh, yeah.
They're making a new season. Some of it is already shot or they're shooting it right now. So if they changed course and then the next season is going to be a little bit more cohesive and tight, we could have a great new iteration of Daredevil that doesn't reach the greatness of that third season on Netflix, but that comes close to it, I guess, if possible. But a very mixed experience for me.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I thought viewership would be quite good for Daredevil in comparison to a lot of the other MCU shows.
It's not doing well.
No, ratings wise, it's really low. Not a lot of people are watching this. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. Because I've heard they're setting up for another season and they're trying to set up the Defenders again in this next season, and it's like, oh god, this is yeah. I mean, if you can't get your first season right, and you had to do such significant reshoots, you clearly don't have a plan for this, and which as we know from Captain America Brave New World and all these other MCU projects which go through such significant reshoots, it never works out.
Yeah, this is another project that started before there was kind of like a change of direction for the whole MCU. So the way they repurpose the show tells you that they want to change course. They want to improve. They want to make things a little bit better than they are. And this gives me faith. I still drink the Kool-Aid. I still try to believe that the worst stuff is behind us. And these next few projects will prove me either wrong or right. If Thunderbolts sucks and Fantastic Four sucks, then you will never hear me defend Marvel ever again. That's a promise. But for now, I'm cautiously optimistic because there was some good stuff in this show, even though we didn't really go into that much of the good stuff because it was funnier and more entertaining to go into the bad stuff. But it was good stuff with Daredevil and Wilson Fisk and their parallelism between the two.
But were you saying overall you probably wouldn't recommend it though?
I mean, it depends who you are, man.
Yeah.
If you liked the Netflix TV show, I could either recommend it to you because you want to see these characters back, or you could just tell you not to watch it because it doesn't hold up to the standards of the previous seasons, and you're better off just believing that it ended with season 3. But there is some good stuff in here. If you want to look for it, if you want to watch it, it's weird because so much stuff has happened in the MCU between the third season and this season, and Wilson Fisk kind of feels like a different character. But if you manage to remove that aspect of the character from the TV show you're watching and be like, okay, it's just a new story with Wilson Fisk doing stuff and Matt Murdock has to stop him. If you manage to get away from, the logistics of how can he become fucking mayor after all he has done, if you can, it's enjoyable in parts. It's well made in parts, just in parts.
Yeah. Okay.
I would give it a 6.5.
Okay, that's still pretty decent score.
I'm a high grader.
I think you're drunk on the Disney Kool-Aid, my brother.
Yeah,
but
I'm poisoned. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm just done. I'm lost.
Okay, good. Well, so something good I saw, watched it last week. It's been on my watch list for a long time. Is the film called Moon. Have you
Oh,
ever heard of Moon?
yes, I love Moon. You didn't see it before? Was the first time?
Had never watched it. Had always wanted to, and just for whatever reason, I just never did. And I always thought it was directed by Danny Boyle, but it's actually Duncan Jones, who's the eldest son of David Bowie.
Yeah, he did Source
Which
Code and Moon and the Warcraft movie as well.
I know. I was looking at his filmography and I was like, this is a bizarre filmography because Moon is really revered as a a sort of modern sci-fi classic.
Yeah,
And Source Code is decent. It's a good, fun, entertaining movie.
it's great. Source Code is great. I love it.
A kind of a bizarre filmography, but this film was so good. I can't believe it took me this long to watch it because it's Sam Rockwell, who I absolutely love as well.
He's great.
He always steals the show in whatever often he plays side characters in films, and he often steals the show completely. Like in Jojo Rabbit, I thought he was amazing. You ever seen Green Mile?
Yeah, of course. Oh, he was in that.
Yeah,
He was. That's true.
he plays the redneck racist, like crazy dude, and he's so good in that. And there's kind of he has such a range of characters he can play. And in Moon, he's the only real character in it. We have obviously Kevin Spacey plays his like robot AI assistant, but we get three in the film. We get three different versions that Sam Rockwell plays. I won't give any spoilers for maybe people that haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple premise of a story, but we get these three different versions of Sam Rockwell. Two of them we get for a long time in the film, and they are so different from each other. Like at points, it's like I am literally looking at two different people. Like his performance between the two is so distinct. One's this kind of like lackadaisical, funny, quite sloppy guy, and then the other one's super serious and like attentive, and just the dichotomy between the two is fantastic. Absolutely loved it. And yeah, it also has one of the best posters for a movie I've ever seen as well.
Yeah, I have it on Blu-ray, and the poster is the Blu-ray's cover. So, yeah.
Nice. Such a great poster. And also what I loved about it, again, not getting into too much spoilers for it, but Kevin Spacey as the robot assistant.
Yeah.
The direction or sort of arc of its story is so unique, and you never see this in sci-fi films. It's like, well, I'll maybe give a bit of a tease, but we always see the robot or AI assistant who's working for the big corporation. They're the evil ones, and they take the evil turn, and
They turn evil halfway through. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Whereas, we get this great scene where Sam Rockwell's character has gone through this discovery, and he's, he wants to try and escape the situation he's in. And we're like, oh my God, well, this robot's going to start turning bad and going to start forcing him here. But he actually ends up helping him on the quest. And it's like, oh, you never see that.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a rare turn for one of those kind of characters to make.
True.
Yeah, very emotional story, has like a really good heart to it, and for the most part is just hilarious. Like Sam Rockwell's performance is so funny. Yeah, highly recommend this one.
Yeah, I recommend it too. It's a really fun, really well-made sci-fi movie. Probably the best in Duncan Jones' filmography. I mean,
Oh yeah.
even though I do have a soft spot for Source Code as well. It's funny that you would mention Moon because we were talking about Mickey 17 recently, and you
Yes,
hadn't
I
seen
was
that yet.
thinking of no, but I was thinking of Mickey 17 when we were watching it, and I was like, this is probably what Mickey 17 should have been, or like this is how you do that story excellently. And like I said, I haven't seen Mickey 17, but I know from yourself, you said it wasn't all that, it wasn't too special. It was a decent film.
Yeah, it's definitely not Bong Joon-ho's best. I find it a bit meandering and weird, even though there's some very great stuff in it. And while I was watching it in the cinema, I kept thinking back at Moon, which is unfair to Mickey 17 because it's not trying to be Moon. But the dynamic between the doubles, I was expecting something more akin to Moon. And when I didn't get it, I was like a bit disappointed. Not because I didn't get the same movie that I've already seen, but because this movie, with less, it tells you so much more.
Oh my God. Yeah, I bet I bet Mickey 17 is over 2 hours and 15 minutes, or
It's very
probably
long.
somewhere there or thereabouts. I'm pretty sure Moon is, bang on 90 minutes, something like that. It tells the story so succinctly and it executes it perfectly. There's no fluff. it doesn't need to go on for that long. It's executing that simple premise just as it needs to be.
Yeah, Mickey 17 is very self-indulgent and overindulgent. It takes its sweet time telling you a story that is very obvious at the beginning, then it shifts gears and just becomes something else entirely that you weren't even expecting and you probably didn't really want. But yeah, like, again, sorry, we're talking about Moon. The reason why I mention it is because it's a recent movie with like a similar premise, similar idea, even though it's very different in execution and how it works, and all the logistics of it are very different. But it did remind me of it, and it did remind me of how much I love Moon because of its simplicity and the performance at the core of it, and just how engaging and interesting and original it is, and it feels, and it's very short but really impactful.
Yeah. I also love it when it's like quite a rare thing you see in films, but it's because I'm a big fan of like body horror.
Yeah.
And so I love it when a character is like physically deteriorating and they kind of play it for laugh.
You love it. That's a strange thing to love.
It's
But
so
yeah,
funny
I get it.
sometimes. Like Sam, there's a point in the movie where Sam Rockwell's character is literally falling apart, and he's on death's door, and he's dragging himself along, coughing his guts up, and it's certainly played for laughs in moments, and it's so funny. And there's a few other sort of examples. I remember thingies in The Shape of Water. You get Michael Shannon's character has a similar thing. He's got this weird infection on his hand, and it keeps growing and growing, and it's kind of played for a bit of comedic value too. And I don't know, it's just, and yeah, like I said, Sam Rockwell plays it so well, and that it's hilarious and disturbing at the same time.
Sam Rockwell is one of those underrated actors that always shines in any movie he's in.
Yeah.
Seven Psychopaths, he was also in that. It was great in it. He was in the MCU, by the way.
Yes, he's
Justin Hammer.
Yes.
The Tony Stark wannabe.
Yeah. And
best part of Iron Man 2.
He's pretty good in Iron Man 2.
I want him back. I want a fucking show about him and his little dances and his missiles that don't work. But yeah, he's great.
Yeah. 3 Billboards as well. Side character in that, and kind of, obviously Frances McDormand's amazing, Woody Harrelson's amazing, but when I think back at that film, most of the scenes I'm remembering are Sam Rockwell scenes.
It's him.
Yeah, he like I said, he is in a lot of stuff, so it's maybe you don't call him underappreciated, but he doesn't get a lot of leading roles in bigger projects.
Yeah.
And I would I'd like to see him in more stuff, because he's great.
I agree.
And yeah, I suppose another catch up that I was gonna say, I was telling you I went to go see this band last night called Heilung.
Oh yeah.
At O2 Brixton. They're a bit of an acquired taste maybe for some, but it's like an experimental folk band that was formed in Copenhagen, and they're made up of it's a massive ensemble of like drummers and dancers and people that dressed up as like soldiers and people playing instruments that I've never seen in my life, and they're from all this like parts of the Scandi world, Denmark, Norway, Germany, and their music's all based on texts and runic inscriptions from Germanic, like Iron Age and Viking Age. So you actually have no idea necessarily what they're saying, but it's just the kind of atmosphere and the feeling you get from them. And I suppose it's apt to what we're talking about, because they did all the songs for a lot of the Amazon series Vikings. I don't know whether did you watch any of that?
I have never seen it. No, I've been recommended to watch it a bunch of times, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's got a great first couple seasons, and then it drops off really hard. But yeah, it's a really, really like authentic look at the sort of Viking life, which I love that as a topic. And they also did this score for Hellblade 2: Senua's Saga, which I haven't played. I played the first one, and I thought it was really, really good. I had a Game Pass, and I just downloaded it to check it out. And it's not really puzzle games aren't usually my kind of thing. And so I did find maybe the gameplay got a little bit tedious, but like the atmosphere and tone of those games are so cool.
Yeah, it's on my list. It's one of those games that really you need to be in the mood for.
Yeah.
I guess, it's a very harrowing experience. This woman is kind of like going through a psychosis and she's seeing things. But I guess, this style of music really lends itself to the storytelling, I
Oh
guess.
yeah, and there's like a warning at the beginning of the first game, I remember, and I was like, it kind of hooked me straight away. And it's like, this game is like a visual representation, audio and visual representation of what it's like to have like schizophrenia or something. And I was like, what the hell? This sounds bizarre. And the opening scene of the game, you're on this like rowboat going through this valley, and
Hmm.
the way they do the sound design, you're hearing all these different voices from like all around you, and it constantly is
Yeah.
just like hearing all these different voices in your head, and it is really disturbing, and it's very unique of a game. And yeah, like we said, like Heilung's soundtrack and their score really elevates this material as well. And yeah, if it's your kind of thing, I would highly recommend to check them out, because they were one of the best bands I've seen live for a long time.
I mean, they sound like a band you made up in your dreams and they just materialized because you described them and like, oh yeah, that's the kind of music that Tyler would love. Just, weird noises from the Viking era, just, tribalistic
Throat
music and
singing.
people.
They had
Yeah,
two, I think they call them berserkers. They had these two guys they called berserkers on stage, and they play the
of course they
drums.
do.
And they're bald, covered in tattoos, like covered in runic tattoos, big beards, and they like one of the guys had his full head painted red, and it looked like he was covered in blood. And for like 2 hours straight, this guy is just losing his shit and smashing on the drums, and it's like, these motherfuckers are touching something deep in their souls right now.
And in your soul too,
Yeah, it's great.
and
It's great. I'd highly recommend if you haven't heard of them and that sounds like it's up your street.
nice. I will check them out.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, that concludes our podcast for today. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion on The Last of Us. Like we said, we will be trying to do an episode by episode review each week, and we'll be getting those out to you. We covered Daredevil and Moon and Heilung as well. And yeah, we'll be putting these out as clips later on this week. And also check out all the other stuff we've been releasing at the moment. We've done a recent video on the MCU. We've done some gaming content, and we've got more video essays and podcasts and videos on the way. So stay tuned.
Yeah, welcome to the cult, guys.
Nice.